So we're here with Dean Dexter, a candidate for Cheyenne City Council in Ward 2. Welcome, Dean. Glad to have you here with us.
Glad to be here.
I'm Brian Martin. I'm the managing editor here at the Wyoming Tribune Eagle, and I have a couple of community reps on the board with us.
I'm Sharon Fain with Black Hills Energy.
Bob Feck, Cheyenne Animal Shelter.
Nice.
So again, Dean, thanks, and thanks for running, and welcome to the interview. Let's start off with what specific issues or concerns caused you to run for Cheyenne City Council this year.
I think that Cheyenne's at a crossroads right now. And I believe that if we make some investments, I've felt like there's many in the city that know the cost of everything, but the value of minimal things. And so I really felt like it's time to look at some value. And it means that there's some investment that I feel needs to be made. I mean, you had an article this morning that talked about the roads. So those are, in a nutshell, I felt like just a change in vision, somebody that takes some business, a view of a business and some of that type of mentality as opposed to, so I guess that's what I was looking for. Just something that, a business view, a different vision. It's time for a change. And so I felt like, as opposed to being a part of the folks that are always complaining about it, I thought, you know what, I need to put my money where my mouth is. I'm making investments in the city on a personal level. I need to really step up. So that's why I decided I wanted to run.
And what qualifications do you bring to the table that you feel would make you a good member of the Cheyenne City Council?
I've been a business owner for 20 years, and I've brought jobs. So when I moved my business to Cheyenne, I'm not a Cheyenne native. I had 1.5 employees. And right now I've got 30 employees. And so I understand what it takes to grow a business and what it means to invest. And so from my standpoint, it was really pretty easy. I think that's the type of vision, as opposed to somebody that hasn't brought jobs in, that hasn't had to make a profit or make payroll. Those are things that I want to actually bring to the table. And I understand there's things that perhaps on the more political side that I'm a neophyte at. I just don't know. But I think that the business development, making sure things actually happen, running a variety of projects is something that I can help with.
Just for the record, can you say what you do for a living? I know you
Yeah, I'm one of the owners of Warehouse 21, and my specialty, so we're a full service marketing firm. And we work for a variety of folks, both up and down the Front Range, as well as national clients. My specialty is actually exhibits. And so I'm really responsible for the deployment and the implementation of these plans. And so I'm actually the one that my crew that I personally supervise, we build it and install it. So we deploy it wherever. So I'm very familiar with both planning, and then we have to actually deliver on our promises, and we have to make sure that it's cost effective and that we're doing what we're supposed to so our customers are happy. So.
Great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Dean, what do you believe is the biggest challenge facing the city? If you could name the top one and then maybe a few others.
I think the biggest challenge is changing an attitude to one of investment versus spending. And I'll use the West Edge as a good example. The West Edge is an area of, it's been a blight. It's sort of run down. And so we need to take a look at how do we do and change that so that we actually can improve the infrastructure. When that happens, there's a number of things that are going to, that will result from that. We're going to see an increase of tax revenue because the property taxes are going to go up. I'll use the steam plant as a good example. Steam plant for the past 10 years, I think, has generated a total of $87,000 in property taxes. And I think it's actually, that may even be 27 years. If the steam plant, with what the private investors that have gone into that, if they develop it and they do what they need, then the value increases. The property taxes goes up to almost about $40,000 a year. So we can quickly see in a matter of time, if we actually invest in this area and revitalize this, the problem that the city's facing with revenue is going to change slightly. There's services that have to be provided, but the revenue model is going to increase. So that's why I'm looking investment. And then that's probably the top priority. Second one from there is really looking at the revenue models. there's some problems with the way the city is doing both development. How are we paying for the roads that we're doing? I know that we're doing a lot of repair on roads, and I know that costs money, and I know the city doesn't have a big budget for new roads. But looking at that, so one, do we have to reevaluate where the revenue's coming? How do we take a look at those streams? And I don't have all the answers. I need to delve into that. I just know that's a big problem, and we need to look at that. And those are probably the two biggest ones. A related third is really retention of really our youth of the city. We're educating. We've got great educational organizations, UW, LCCC. My daughter actually graduated from LCCC, loved it. It's an awesome school, and yet it was really difficult to find work because it's all gone south down the Front Range. So some of that investment here allows us to retain those type of individuals, and it helps keep the city vibrant. I don't want to be like Fort Collins, which is why I'm here in Wyoming and Cheyenne specifically. I like the vibe that's here, but I think it's time for us to maybe make something of our own and to maybe take a few steps in the right direction.
Kind of playing off of that, Dean, you say you don't want Cheyenne to become like Fort Collins, but what is your vision for Cheyenne specifically?
Well, I think that we have a unique viewpoint and a unique attitude here that I really do like. But there is a vibrancy. If you take a look at some of the cities down the Front Range, for example, they look at things perhaps a little differently. Case in point is that there's a number of downtown development authorities that are down in Front Range cities, and I've talked with several. Those organizations actually have some teeth, in which case they have the ability to fine absentee landlords or these people with these dilapidated buildings. Now, what's happened is, I know the fear here is it's almost a civil liberties kind of an issue. Don't tell me what I can and can't do with my property. The problem is that we have blight, and that people have, we've got the Z's building that's been vacant for years now. It needs to be torn down. We have the Hole that's, been there for 14 years now. Nothing's happened. With the right kind of organization, in the cities where they've implemented it correctly, those organizations now actually have kept their downtowns up. The absentee landlords actually use their DDAs for helping them maintain their property. So their investment has increased. The tax base has increased. People love to go shopping there. So it becomes a downtown mecca. While we don't have to be the same way as them, there's a unique Wyoming attitude and stamp that we can put, but we still need to have the infrastructure. So we need to have those things in place. So that's one area where I'm thinking how we've worked our DDA needs to change.
Expanding on the vision, what does Cheyenne not have that you think it needs to have, and how would you as a council member make that happen?
I think what we need, and I think it comes to maybe a vision of the future. There's a difference between leadership and management, and I think where Cheyenne is there's a lot of good managers. There's good people there, they're doing a job, but they're managing as opposed to really staking out, here's what I need to do, here's leadership. We're seeing some of that when I saw the West Edge project, and that's probably one of the really a nice vision that the city has kind of staked out, but they're waffling on it. The city's kind of pulled back and says, well, we've got some other sewer issues, and here's things that need to change. And so we need somebody that's really going to push and fight for that and say, this is the vision. This is where we need to go. It's not the first time the city has done that. I know that they had a plan back in 2010 that they outlined. It did a lot of stuff on the space that's behind Walmart and Lowe's and kind of outlined some cityscapes there. Nothing ever happened. It's an awesome plan, but we managed it because it didn't fit with the management plan, it didn't go anywhere. So that's why I look at it and go, man, we need to do something. The steam plant sat empty for 27 years. Nothing's happened. So at some point we have to just say, enough's enough. We're going to do something, and it might cost us something. Well, enough, we need to invest. and then we'll make it.
Dean, you keep mentioning West Edge,
Mhm.
and there is also another group that's trying to develop an area downtown called the Downtown Core.
Mhm.
How would you, if there were funds that became available, would you direct those funds to West Edge, or would you direct them to the Downtown Core, which is currently
Mhm.
gaining some steam there? And would there be consideration or concern about sprawl if you were to use those dollars for West Edge?
This is what I'm thinking. West Edge is the low-hanging fruit. The downtown core is, and I've got to go into more detail on it, but there's a lot of stuff there duplicating what Fort Collins has done with alleyways. And I'm thinking that's not really changing much. It does make the downtown area slightly better. So murals and alleyways, great, that's nice. But the low-hanging fruit for the city is the West Edge, in which case there's still open area. There's currently, if you outline the three major players within the West Edge, I'll just pick on two. We've got the steam plant, and then we've got Taco John's in the West, in that area. And there's probably they've brought in, and with some other owners, I know there's been about 10 million of potential private equity that's come into that area. So for a minimal investment on the city, that area can come in because the development is easier to do. We can habitate it, we can build it. There's offices, there's some eating areas. So it's easier for us to hit the West Edge and actually complete it than it is for us to try to revitalize downtown by putting up some murals and making alleyways a little more friendly. What happens then if the West Edge become vibrant? We almost tee it off. So at 17th Street, we continue what was done on the 6th Penny for 17th, and we just come down, and it'll fill in the downtown area. So we've got to get, we want to have employment, places that are building the tax base, and that'll happen in the West Edge where it's not necessarily going to happen in the downtown.
And your business is located in the West Edge, correct?
We're actually just a little bit outside the West Edge, although in full disclosure, I invested in what was the old Holmes property, which was a city block outside. So we invested $1.3 million to buy that property, and we have plans to actually develop on that property. And so I guess in the full disclosure, I'm an investor in the West Edge. And I see it as a spot that's worth my money. Now, I think the city needs to do stuff to help with the amenities. There's only so much that private equity can do. Nobody wants to build $1 million house next to a trailer park. No offense to trailer parks, but you just don't want to do that. So there's things that the city needs to do as far as its infrastructure, sort of the streetscape that then invites private equity. So we take the West Edge, I know was a $2 million is what the city, I think, invested in the plan. That generated, I believe, 12 to 14 million of EPA, FEMA, and other grant funds that the city got to develop. That generated a combined total of about 20 million of private equity that's poised, ready to invest. So for a $2 million investment, we actually have, almost $30 million plus of money that comes in. The downtown core hasn't done any of that. So to me, the downtown core is just really secondary. It will happen organically, and I'm a big supporter of it, but West Edge is the low-hanging fruit, and from a business standpoint.
Dean, where do you stand on the use of taxpayer money for amenities like the Children's Museum?
I like the fact they have that on, I believe it's either the 6th penny or they were looking for a 7th penny. And so long as the citizens can actually vote on it, I don't have a problem with that. Case in point, airport, I know was 6th penny. I hate to say it, as much as I love flying, I have a pilot's, I'm a pilot, I have my license, and I think Cheyenne has got a great airport. I fly out of Denver. And so that's one where, I think there's a better benefit for the city to invest that money into the Children's Museum downtown to help revitalize an area that's blighted and fill that hole than it is to say build an airport. And we as a city said, we want to build a new terminal. So we've got money allocated to a bridge to nowhere. This terminal is going to be there. It's going to be nice. And, we all saw what, American Airlines did. Once the subsidy ended, they were out of here. And so that's where I don't have a problem with spending the money. I want to spend it wisely. So long as the citizens can actually vote on it and give yay or nay, then I'm really okay with that. And I do think it's a better investment than, say, the airport terminal. So I have no problem with going on record saying that as well. So.
Okay. Do you think, just to follow up, do you think Seventh Penny is the better route for the museum than Sixth Penny, or does it matter as long as voters get a say?
I think it doesn't matter so long as voters get a say. I know that there's some things with Fifth Penny that the city opted to do. I do like the idea of, I'd love to see that expand so that we have more funds for roads, because we're woefully underfunded with what they're doing there. So I think it's all part of really taking a look at the revenue model. The city needs to really rethink some revenue models. I'm not sure how, as we look at some developments, because there's infrastructure that has to go into there and the city maintains that. How are we looking at that? And so I know that there's some homework that I'm going to have to do.
So while we're talking about those taxes, what would your priority list look like for the next Sixth Penny ballot?
Oh gosh, Six Penny ballot, I think that really West Edge is a priority. I think that would be sort of top. And then from there, I know there's some things that are already on it. The Children's Museum is one that I'm going to vote yes for. So after that, I think depending on the discretionary funds, I know I'd love to see some stuff reallocated so that the road folks get a little more money. I'm tired of dodging potholes myself, so that's an easy one for me.
The city owns the Belvoir Ranch, and there's been some talk about trying to get that open to some recreation access. What are your feelings on that? How big of a priority would that be for you?
Belvoir Ranch, I think, actually is very important because the city isn't able to use it for what they originally bought it for. So now I think they need to reevaluate. Well, what do we have? It's really in an awesome space. It's really great, and it could be a draw. I talked to folks in a business community down in Colorado, and they're always telling me how they're coming up to Cheyenne or they're coming up to Vidavoo and places like this. So they're spending their money up here as opposed to usually it's the reverse with our folks going down. I'd love to see the Belvoir Ranch actually putting in some trails. So if nothing else, while we evaluate what's the long-term goal, that we've got some stuff that the city and the citizens can actually use. I mean, it's a beautiful area. I'd love to go out hiking there or have a picnic. And then at least I'm getting something for our tax dollars. I mean, that money is spent, so it's not coming back unless we opt to sell it. And I really don't want to sell it either. I'd rather use it for some, the hiking and nature trails and stuff that would be fun. Or, I'd rather get I've been thinking about a mountain bike because it's just a great area here. I'd love to go buy one, and boy, that would be where I'd be riding it as well. And I know I'm not the only person that thinks that way.
Where does that fit then in the funding priorities for you? Would it be a high priority?
It's, we've got some immediate concerns. That's one that doesn't bring in a whole lot of revenue generation or as much, so it's going to be lower down. I really think that we've got some, the roads, making sure that our firefighters and the police department are staffed and have the equipment that they need. That's more important. And where I see an investment where it will return and bring in private equity or jobs or business and improve our tax base, that's a high priority as well. That one is an amenity, and I think it makes it nice. It makes Cheyenne a great place to live, but we've got to take care of some other things, I think, that are perhaps more pressing.
So you've talked about investment versus spending. One of the purposes of government is to provide essential government services that the citizens cannot provide for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So in your own mind, have you decided or divided out what is an essential government service versus a secondary service or a third level service?
Yeah, I really have. Police and fire protection are really equal in my mind, and those are really top priorities. Those are the essential services. And then when you sort of step down from there, and I'd say, well, and the city's really doing a good job of it. You'd have road work and sanitation and drainage, water egress out. We don't want a repeat of the flood. So those really, I mean, other than those, the first two are personal safety and the well-being of Cheyenne residents. The others make the city a nice place. You're not driving on potholes. You know that if there's a big rainstorm, your basement's not going to flood. We're going to get the water out, that the cities, the streets are maintained, and that the garbage gets picked up. Those are things that are super important. Those are really the priorities. After that, there's other areas that I think we start looking at. And in some place, then that's when the investment issue takes into account. There may be some things as I start looking, here's those essentials. And all right, do I fill this pothole or do I need, where's the priority there? And, how long can this street last? What are some other areas that we need to do? So it gets maybe a little gray in that area. And so I know that there's some stuff I need to look at, but that just help. I hope that helps you see where my priorities are.
If you take it a little different direction, Dean, with the city budget and how the city spends its money and how much it saves, what do you think are the priorities there for what the city should be spending its money on and how much it should be saving?
I think that we need to be spending it's like any family budget. I try to save every month, and so I view the city as the same way. I would say that we need to be setting aside 10% of the budget, an adequate amount that we're putting into, we're seeing a revenue issue this year, and we'll potentially see that for a few more years as well as the energy issue affects the state revenue. But other than that, I think it's just, I would come in and just take a look. Here's my top priorities. Here's the budgets that are being allocated, and just making sure that they're being spent wisely on that. I think that we can overkill on savings. So I'm not advocating that we spend everything, every penny that we bring in. I do think we need to be intelligent about our budget. But I do believe that we need to be setting aside, as long as we've got something for long term.
And where do you stand on possible anti-discrimination ordinance?
In my business, we have advocated and basically state that there is no discrimination in our business. And I'll broaden it, as opposed to anyone's sexual preference is irrelevant. I hire my employees based on the job that they can do, and I really don't care, so long as they need to do the job. I certainly want them to feel safe and welcome in the community. I wouldn't want anybody to be discriminated against on anything, be it color, gender identity, or what religion they were. So my fear is that if we accept even a small amount, then it opens the door for everything. Laramie has perhaps been more progressive than Cheyenne as far as putting in an ordinance. To be quite honest, I really believe Wyoming ought to look at Utah, which has got a very conservative electorate, and they've got a statewide anti-discrimination ordinance that's statewide. So all cities, everyone's protected. I think that's the ultimate solution. But in the meantime, I've already stated in my business that we're not going to discriminate. And I think that that's important for the city to do. I think that there's individuals that would potentially come to Cheyenne and come to Wyoming, but don't, because they don't feel safe or they don't feel protected.
There's some general fund money and also some fifth penny sales tax money that the city pays to a series of nonprofits in the community through the United Way. Are you familiar with that process, and what do you think of it?
Not totally. I'm not totally familiar with that process, but in general, and I'll explain what I kind of prefer, because I do it myself personally. The United Way is an aggregator. So what I've done as a business is I've outlined local organizations that I choose, and my partner, Dave Tuber, we both choose to support, and we fund directly as opposed to aggregating. So there's nothing wrong with United Way, and we actually do some support for United Way, but the majority of our funds go directly to the organizations that we need. So I would want to take a look at which organizations are actually being funded that way. I think we'd get more bang for our buck as a city if we go directly to those organizations and give them the exact same dollars that would be putting into United Way. So I do think that that's important for the community, whether it be Habitat for Humanity, whether it be Boys and Girls Club. There's things that are just, it's good for the community to have. It avoids problems in the future if we can get some of the at-risk citizens involved, or however it works. I think those are good. That's money that's well spent.
Other questions? Dean, is there anything else that we didn't address that you would like to cover? Anything you'd like to say?
You know, I guess that's a great question. I guess thinking about the vision thing, in that I really think that Cheyenne is I do believe it's at a crossroads. Case in point, I think if the West Edge doesn't go through, there is potential for, I know for a fact, at least 100 jobs leaving the area. And that, 100 jobs with the payroll of probably 4 to 5 million a year, maybe a little more, won't be here. It took 27 years for somebody to actually, who had vision, to come in and buy the power plant. If we can't do something, I don't see anybody touching that for another 20 years. So the question for me is, are we satisfied with where we are now and where we're going? Or are we going to do something different right now? Because for lack of a better word, the stars are aligned, the money's on the ground, things are ready to go. And we can either, move and start, or we can wait another 20 years till things kind of fix itself again. Meanwhile, we'll continue to have the same pressures. We'll be, our graduates will be going down the Front Range because of the amenities there, as opposed to staying here and keeping our communities vibrant. So for me, I think that is important. And I think that as a councilman, that having some of that vision means that I can help steer. And knowing that I'm one of a group of people means that, it's not going to be a dictator. I can't do what I want. There's things that I'm going to have to work with. But that having somebody there with that vision, I think, is really important. And different than management, different than just maintaining what we have, looking at things differently. And I think that's where my business experience really helps, in that every year I have a budget. I have to make a payroll. I have to decide, and sometimes I'll look and there's equipment that I need to buy, and I'm going to see, will that equipment pay off for me? Will it make me money? So I'll make the investment. The city's no different. I know that the city did not want to buy. There was a truck that they were going to either lease or buy that was going to help with potholes, and I know that they opted that didn't go through, and I wonder if that was perhaps a mistake, because we seem to. We don't, I hear we don't have enough money to do it right. Well, then we certainly don't have enough money to do it wrong, because we're coming back. So on one of the feeder streets to where I live, I know there's a place that they have done the potholes 3 times already this year, 3 times. And I'm thinking, that's a waste of money. I mean, if we should have done it once, I can see that. But now we've done it 3 times. How much more money do we have to spend before we say enough's enough? Let's just do it right. And that's what we do as a business.
Anything else?
I think that's it.
Well, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate you being here.